Imagine being a single mother, holding your child's hand as you step into first class, a space you earned through hard work and dedication. But instead of a warm welcome, you're met with suspicion, accusations, and public humiliation. This is the reality Imani Brooks faced on what should have been a routine business trip. Why was she questioned repeatedly while others passed without a second glance? Why did a flight attendant insist she didn't belong? What happens when dignity is challenged miles above the ground, in a place where every second counts? And more importantly, how far would one mother go to protect her son and demand justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who has ever been made to feel invisible? This story isn't just about a flight delay or a seating dispute. It's a powerful journey of resilience, courage, and transformation. It asks us to confront uncomfortable truths about bias and belonging, while reminding us how one call, one stand, can shake an entire system. If you've ever felt powerless in the face of injustice, this story is for you. Hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe now to hear how Imani's quiet strength grounded an entire flight and sparked a movement. Imani Brooks stood at Gate 48B with her boarding pass clutched in one hand and her son's tiny fingers wrapped tightly around the other. She wasn't nervous about flying. She'd flown dozens of times for work: Los Angeles, London, Nairobi, but today felt different. Maybe it was because this time she wasn't flying for business. Maybe it was because she had Ezra beside her. Or maybe it was because this was the first time she was flying first class and not alone. "Mom," Ezra whispered, tugging her hand, "are we going to sit in the front where they give you real forks?" Imani chuckled softly, adjusting the strap of his backpack over her shoulder. "Yes, baby. Real forks, real plates, real everything. You're in for a treat." Ezra grinned. His big brown eyes scanned the boarding area. He looked so small among the tall glass windows and the sea of rolling suitcases. A nearby businessman in a pressed navy suit glanced their way, then back to his phone. Another woman in pearls clutched her handbag a little tighter as Imani walked by. She felt it, not loud, but there, the invisible suspicion, the quiet calculation in strangers' eyes. It wasn't new, it wasn't always intentional, but it was always present. And today, it pressed harder. "Are you excited?" she asked Ezra, hoping to shift his focus. He nodded quickly. "Do they let kids wear those big headphones like pilots?" "We'll see." She smiled. They were flying from Denver to Washington to EO, a flight just under 4 hours. Imani had been invited to speak at a federal cybersecurity roundtable, an honor she hadn't even applied for. A colleague nominated her, and she got the invite 2 weeks later. It was a big deal. So big that when the airline saw her credentials and purpose of travel, they automatically upgraded her seat. She hadn't asked. She didn't pull strings. They offered it freely, and now, as she stood with Ezra beside the priority boarding sign, she felt it, that subtle tension, like she had wandered into a room where people politely pretended not to notice her, but absolutely did. Pre-boarding for families and those needing additional time, the gate agent announced. Imani approached the gate and handed over their tickets. The agent scanned them, then looked up briefly. "Flying first today?" she asked, her tone polite but clipped. "Yes, seats 1A and 1B. The scanner beeped green." Imani smiled. "Thank you." The woman nodded, barely glancing at Ezra. They walked down the jet bridge, shoes tapping softly on the metal floor. Ezra whispered, "Mom, Are we really allowed to sit in the front? Amani bent down slightly. Yes, baby, we are. Why do you ask? He shrugged. Just, that lady didn't look like she thought we should. Amani paused. That moment, that chill. A 9-year-old could see it. She didn't want to explain this again. Not here. Not before they even took off. She wanted him to enjoy this. Inside the plane. They were greeted by a tall woman with chestnut brown hair and a tight bun. Her name tag read Paula. Welcome aboard, Paula said. Can I see your passes? Amani handed them over again. She knew the drill. Still, something about Paula's gaze unsettled her. Paula stared at the tickets, then at Amani, then at Ezra. Oh, first class, she said, more to herself than to them. She stepped aside slowly. Seats are to your left. They walked in, settled into 1A and 1B. Amani helped Ezra buckle his seatbelt. He bounced slightly in the plush leather seat. This is better than a movie theater, he whispered. She smiled and smoothed down his curls. Across the aisle, a white couple settled into 2C and 2D. The man glanced their way, then leaned in to whisper something to his wife. She looked, too. Amani took a breath. She checked her phone. She responded to a message from her mentor, Camden. She looked at the window. Everything on the surface was fine, but under it, a slow, silent ripple. 10 minutes passed. Passengers filed in. A man in a blazer struggled to fit his bag in the overhead. The flight crew moved briskly down the aisle. Then Paula appeared again. I'm sorry, she said, looking at Amani. There seems to be an issue with your upgrade. Amani blinked. Excuse me. The system flagged it as irregular. I'm going to ask you to step back while we confirm with the gate. Amani sat still. I have the confirmation email. The upgrade was automatic. I understand, Paula said. But we've had errors before. We just need to be sure. Ezra looked up. Mom, Amani didn't move. I'd prefer to wait here until it's sorted, she said quietly. Paula's eyes narrowed slightly. That's not our protocol. Amani's voice stayed calm. Then I suggest we follow up with your supervisor. I'm not leaving my seat unless I'm legally required to. Paula paused, then gave a tight smile. I'll be back shortly. She walked away. Ezra whispered, Did we do something wrong? Amani reached for his hand. No, baby. We did everything right. But inside her chest, a weight pressed harder. Not fear, not even anger. Just sadness. Sadness that even now, with all she had earned, she still had to fight for the right to sit. The plane hadn't even left the ground, and already she could feel the storm rising. Amani adjusted the strap of her crossbody bag and tried to steady her breath. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not today. Ezra sat beside her quietly, his small hand still resting inside hers. She could feel the confusion in his grip. It wasn't just the seat. It wasn't just the tone of the flight attendant. It was the accumulation of little things. 1,000 paper cuts of doubt and dismissal. She turned to him with a small smile. We're okay, she whispered. Ezra nodded but didn't smile back. A soft voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be pushing back from the gate in just a few minutes. Please make sure all carry-ons are stowed and seatbelts fastened. Paula returned. She carried herself with brisk efficiency. Behind the smile, there was something sharper now. She leaned slightly over the row. Ma'am, I spoke with the ground crew. The seat assignment was flagged because it wasn't booked through the standard loyalty program. That might be why it triggered our system. Amani tilted her head gently. It was an automatic corporate upgrade. I can show you the email if needed. Paula's lips tightened. I'm sure you believe that. But if you could step back to the galley while we sort this out, it would help things move faster. This time, her tone was firmer, less polite, more directive. Ezra looked up. He was beginning to tremble. No, Imani said gently. I'm sorry. My son is anxious and I've already boarded according to procedure. I'm not moving unless I'm asked by a supervisor. Paula's expression shifted. I'm the lead on this flight. Then you should know better, came a voice from across the aisle. Imani turned. A silver-haired woman in a navy wrap and comfortable flats leaned forward. Her voice was calm, her eyes unwavering. Her boarding pass is valid. She's seated. Unless there's a legal reason to remove her, I suggest you let this woman fly with dignity. Paula hesitated. I wasn't speaking to you, ma'am, but you were speaking over a child's head. The woman replied. So yes, you were speaking to all of us. Imani blinked. The woman extended a hand across the aisle. Margaret Linwood, call me Maggie. Imani nodded gratefully and returned the handshake. Imani Brooks, this is my son. Ezra. Maggie smiled at the boy. Hi, Ezra. You're in for quite a view from the window. Ezra smiled shyly. Paula stood still for a moment, visibly calculating her next move. Then she turned sharply and walked back down the aisle. The man in 2C, the one who had glanced earlier, now leaned toward his wife and whispered again. His wife glanced back at Imani and shook her head. Ezra looked out the window. Mom, he said softly, why did she think we weren't supposed to be here? Imani took a long breath. There it was, that question, that pain, the one no parent should have to answer at 35,000 feet, the one that comes long before math or science, the one that never leaves. I don't know, she said, but we belong here. He looked up at her. Even if they don't believe it. Yes, especially then. The hum of the engine vibrated softly beneath their feet. Julian, a younger flight attendant with a gentle expression, came by with orange juice for Ezra and a bottle of water for Imani. Let me know if you need anything, he said quietly. His eyes held a flicker of apology. He didn't say it, but it was there. He knew. Ezra sipped his juice with both hands. He was trying to be brave. Maggie leaned slightly into the aisle. I used to teach constitutional law, she said. I saw people like her 100 times, always hiding behind policy, never behind principle. Imani nodded. She kept saying it was a system issue, but only after seeing us. Exactly. Maggie replied. Bias wears uniforms too. Imani turned back toward Ezra. He had started drawing in his notebook. It was a plane, with little windows and smiling stick figures. In the corner of the page, he had written, Me and Mom, first class. Imani blinked quickly and looked away. She scrolled through her phone, rereading the confirmation email from the airline. Her name, Ezra's name. Seats 1A and 1B, class first, upgrade automatic, verified, everything was in place. She tapped out a message. Camden, quick question. If a corporate upgrade is flagged by the flight team, who has jurisdiction need to confirm a procedure? She didn't hit send yet. Paula returned. She was holding a small tablet in her hand. Ma'am, she said, her voice now more clipped. I need you to verify your upgrade by providing the corporate code or booking confirmation that triggered it. If you can't, I will have to ask you to relocate to the rear of the aircraft until it is sorted out." There it was, the line, the humiliation, but framed in polite procedure. Imani remained still. "Why is this necessary?" she asked calmly. "Because the seat is in question," Paula replied. "Then why not question the other upgraded passengers?" Paula blinked. Imani continued. "The couple behind me. The gentlemen in 3A, I watched them walk in. They didn't show proof. They weren't asked for a thing." Paula's mouth tightened. "That's not your concern." "Actually," said Maggie again, louder this time, "I think it is. And now it's everyone's concern." A murmur rippled through the cabin. The man in 2C raised his voice. "She's disrupting the cabin. Can we just get on with it?" Imani turned toward Paula, her voice unwavering. I'm not surrendering this seat because you're uncomfortable with my presence. I have the confirmation right here." She held up her phone. Paula stared at it. Her lips parted, then closed. "Very well," she said, "but you're creating a disturbance. We may have to escalate this if you continue to question flight policy." She turned and walked briskly toward the front galley. Julian lingered behind. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This isn't how it's supposed to be." Imani nodded once. She didn't need an apology. She needed the truth to hold. And she needed Ezra to know something deeper than silence. Camden's voice on the other end of the call was calm but concerned. Imani lowered her voice. "They're trying to move me out of first class. Said something about a system flag on the upgrade. I'm here with Ezra. We're seated. The passes are confirmed. I haven't raised my voice once, but they're escalating it." Camden exhaled slowly. "Do not move. Do not argue. Let me make a call." Imani ended the call and put her phone back in her lap. She glanced down at Ezra. His pencil had stopped moving. His drawing was half finished now, the stick figure version of her still missing its arms. "You okay?" she asked him softly. He looked up and nodded, though his lips trembled a little. "Are we going to get kicked off the plane?" Imani swallowed the sharpness rising in her throat. "No, baby. We're not going anywhere." She turned toward the aisle as footsteps approached again. Paula was back. This time, she wasn't alone. A man in a co-pilot uniform trailed her, wearing a name tag that read Owen Walsh. His eyes scanned Imani like she was a security breach, not a passenger. His tone was clipped as he stepped forward. "Is there a problem here?" Imani met his gaze. Calm but direct. "No, sir. We're seated in our assigned spots. The flight attendant has raised concerns over our upgrade, even though it's confirmed by email and ticket." Owen didn't acknowledge her documents. He turned toward Paula. "Is this a passenger?" "Yes," she said. "She's refusing to comply with crew instruction." Imani blinked. Her jaw tightened. "That's not true. I'm complying. I'm simply exercising my right to remain in the seat I was lawfully upgraded to." Owen gave a half smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Well, ma'am, we need to be able to manage the cabin as we see fit. If that means moving passengers around due to policy misalignments, we expect cooperation." "Policy misalignments?" Ezra tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, are they mad because we're here?" Imani froze for a moment. She looked at Owen, then Paula, then around the cabin. The whispers were back. Maggie sat straight in her seat across the aisle, lips pressed tight. Julian lingered a few rows back, watching. Imani turned to Owen. "Sir, with respect, I have met every condition required to fly in this seat. I have not disrupted anyone. My child is calm. My documents are confirmed. What exactly is the issue?" Owen's mouth twitched. "The issue, ma'am, is that your presence in this section has triggered a manual review. I don't make the rules. I just enforce them, and I enforce my dignity," she said, her voice calm but unwavering. Owen narrowed his eyes. "If you continue to resist instructions, we may have to involve security." Amani sat still. "Then do it. Involve them, but know that my employer, my legal team, and my son will all be watching what happens next." There was a pause, a heavy silence. Owen didn't move. Neither did she. Then Maggie spoke, her voice loud enough for everyone in the cabin to hear. "For the record, I have not been asked for my credentials or upgrade documentation. Neither have the other passengers. What's different about this mother and son?" A few passengers looked up now. One woman 2 rows back pulled out her phone. Owen turned toward Paula. "Let's step into the galley," he said quietly. They both walked away, tension thick in their wake. Ezra leaned his head against her arm. "I don't get it," he whispered. "I thought you were important. You helped that company stop hackers. You always fix stuff. Why do they think you're not good enough?" Amani closed her eyes for a moment. Pain ran deep across her spine. "You are good enough, and I am good enough, but sometimes people get used to seeing the same kind of faces in places like this. When they see something different, they panic. That's not fair," Ezra said. "No, it's not, but it's real." She looked into his eyes. "But we are real too, and we're here, and we're not going anywhere." Julian came by again with a quiet look. "Can I get you anything?" "Water snack," Amani shook her head. "Thank you, but maybe check in on the other crew members. They seem thirsty for control." Julian gave a tiny laugh, then nodded and stepped away. Maggie leaned in. "You handled that with more poise than I would have." Imani sighed. "I'm tired, but I'm not new to this." "I figured," Maggie said. "They want you to make a scene. They want to make you look unstable, but you're making them squirm with silence. It's powerful." She smiled faintly. Ezra looked up. "Mom, can I finish my drawing?" She kissed the top of his head. "Yes, baby. Finish it. Make it shine." 20 minutes passed. The cabin remained full of unsettled murmurs. Passengers were growing restless. A few began asking why the plane had not pushed back from the gate yet. A whisper ran through row 5. Someone said they heard a crew member was being reviewed. Another said there was a system malfunction. The speculation only grew. Then Imani's phone buzzed. It was a message from Camden. "Got it. Senior contact inside Airline already notified. Ethics officer in transit. Do not move. Support is en route. Stay grounded. Imani." She exhaled slowly. Relief didn't come yet, but it was close. She could feel the balance shifting. She turned back toward the window. Ezra was deep in concentration, adding wings to his airplane sketch. "This one's better than the last," he whispered. Imani leaned closer. "What's different?" Ezra smiled. "I added us inside, and I gave us capes." Her throat caught. She reached for his hand. "You already had one," she said. "I'm just trying to earn mine." In the front galley, voices were raised now. The cockpit door opened. Owen stepped out, red-faced, and said something to Paula. She looked away. Julian returned a moment later. "Ma'am, would you mind staying seated just a little longer?" We're sorting some issues internally. I'll keep you updated." "Thank you, Julian," she said. "I appreciate your professionalism." He gave a small nod, then added in a whisper, "For what it's worth, you're not alone. This doesn't sit right with a lot of us." As he walked away, Amani looked across the aisle to Maggie. The older woman gave her a short nod of solidarity. Amani breathed slowly. She wasn't sure what was coming next, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to move, and she wasn't going to break. The humming of the engine faded in and out like background music that no one was really listening to. Time felt slower inside the cabin. Passengers had grown quiet again, though the unease hadn't disappeared. It simply slipped beneath the surface, like a current under still water. Amani Brooks sat steady in 1A, her back straight, her hands relaxed in her lap, her voice used only when necessary. She had learned, over the years, that stillness could be a weapon. Calm could cut deeper than shouting. Ezra's head now leaned on her shoulder. He had stopped drawing. His eyes were half closed, his breathing even. She wanted to believe this was peace, but it wasn't. It was his way of hiding. Across the aisle, Maggie Linwood flipped through the airline's in-flight magazine with deliberate care. But every so often, she'd glance at Amani and offer the slightest nod, a silent message, "I'm still here." The seat beside Maggie, 3C, was finally filled by a man who entered late, tall, dark suit, wire-framed glasses, and a voice clipped with confidence. He nodded at Maggie briefly, placed his tablet in the seat pocket, and didn't speak. He had the look of someone important, or at least someone used to being treated as such. Within seconds of his arrival, Paula appeared again. Her demeanor had shifted once more, polite on the surface, defensive underneath. "Good afternoon, sir," she said to the man in 3C. "Apologies for the delay. We've had a procedural issue, but we'll be underway shortly." The man in 3C nodded without looking up. She turned to Maggie next with a quick glance. "May I get you anything before takeoff, water, coffee?" Maggie folded her arms. "Yes, you can bring dignity back into this cabin. That would be a start." Paula blinked, the tight smile barely staying on her lips. "Very well," she said. "I'll be back shortly." She moved forward again, her heels clicking a bit sharper on the floor than before. Ezra stirred. "Mom, did she leave again?" "Yes, baby. Are they done?" "Not yet." He nodded quietly and leaned back into her side. Amani reached for his sketchbook and flipped to a new page. She handed it back to him without a word, a gentle way of saying, "It's okay to start over." The man in 3C finally spoke. "Excuse me." His voice was low, composed, and directed at Maggie. "Is something going on?" Maggie didn't hesitate. Yes, that mother and her son were targeted. Their upgrade was questioned, their presence made into a problem. No one else was treated that way. It's been half an hour of implied accusations and evasive explanations. The man raised an eyebrow and finally looked over at Amani. "You're sure?" Maggie answered for her. "I watched it happen. I am sure." The man looked at Amani and gave a slow nod. "I'm sorry that happened," he said. Amani returned the nod. "Thank you." She wasn't sure what else to say. She was tired of explaining the pattern to strangers. It didn't start on this plane. It wouldn't end here either. Julian approached again, quietly and with purpose. "We're still holding. I wanted to check in on you both." Amani looked at him. Any word on the delay? He hesitated. The captain and the first officer are reviewing the incident with crew management. There may be a temporary hold on takeoff until the matter's resolved. Maggie chuckled dryly. That's code for they're trying to cover their own mistakes. Julian glanced at her, the corners of his mouth twitching. Ma'am, I couldn't possibly comment. Amani turned to him. Julian, I appreciate your kindness, but you don't need to risk your job for us. He shook his head. I don't think being decent should cost me anything. If it does, that says more about the system than me. Then he looked down at Ezra and offered him a tiny bag of cookies. For the co-pilot in training, Ezra smiled. Thanks, mister. Julian ruffled his hair lightly and walked away. The plane sat still. Passengers began asking more questions now. A woman behind Amani raised her voice. Excuse me. What is the delay? I have a connection in Baltimore. Another man chimed in. This is ridiculous. Either fly the plane or let us off. And then the whispers began to change. First class is on hold because of some incident. I heard there was a security concern. Maybe someone was aggressive to the crew. It was all half right and half wrong, which made it more dangerous. Amani could feel the narrative twisting away from her. She took out her phone again and typed a short message to Camden. Still holding, passengers getting restless, Paula keeps circling, Ezra holding up okay, but I won't move. She paused, then added, Not this time. Camden replied within seconds. I've escalated it internally. They're sending someone to meet the plane. Stay where you are. Amani, they chose the wrong mother today. She read it twice and allowed herself the smallest smile. Maggie leaned toward her again. Can I ask what you do? Amani looked at her. Cybersecurity. I lead an engineering team. We just helped the Department of Transportation prevent a ransomware attack last month. Maggie raised her eyebrows. And still, they question your right to sit here. Amani's smile faded. The code I write protects this airline's data, but it doesn't protect me from how they see me. Maggie sat back slowly. That might be the most powerful sentence I've heard in years. Ezra looked up again. Are we still gonna fly? Mom, Amani kissed the top of his head. Yes, baby, we'll fly, but maybe not in the way they expected. Outside the window, the sun had dipped lower, orange light streaked across the wing. In the aisle, Paula passed by one more time. This time, she didn't speak, she just looked. Amani held her gaze, then turned away. She had already said enough. Now it was time for others to act, and they would, soon. Amani adjusted the collar of Ezra's hoodie gently as he sat curled beside her. His little shoulders rose and fell with each breath. Steady, but quieter now. Too quiet. He hadn't spoken in over 15 minutes. That wasn't like him. Ezra loved words. He loved questions and shapes and stories and explaining how planes worked even when no one asked. But now he sat there tracing invisible lines on the armrest with his fingertip. His lips pressed together. Amani knew that silence. She had worn it once herself, years ago, in a courtroom, in a meeting, in a hallway after an internship interview where no one had looked her in the eye. It was the silence of not knowing where you fit, of wondering if the room was built to keep you out. She leaned closer and whispered into his ear, Tell me what you're thinking. Ezra shrugged, still looking down. Amani didn't push. Sometimes silence held more truth than words could carry. Across the aisle, Maggie shifted in her seat. Her knees ached. Her hip throbbed a little, but she stayed upright, resolute. her eyes never far from Amani and Ezra. In her purse was a small spiral notebook she hadn't touched in years. She used to write editorials in it, back when she was still teaching law and had the energy to fight with her words every week. She pulled it out now and scribbled something. 3 rows behind. Mr. Remington leaned forward in his seat again and murmured something to his wife. His tone was sharper now. His voice carried, "This has gone too far. We're being held hostage over what a tantrum first class isn't a charity." Amani heard it. So did Maggie, and so did Ezra. He flinched. Amani turned slowly, meeting Mr. Remington's eyes with a look that made him recoil half an inch. She didn't respond. Not with words, not yet. Julian passed through the aisle again with bottled water. He handed one to Amani silently and gently patted Ezra's shoulder. Then he walked away before anyone could see the look in his eyes. Amani leaned down again. "Ezra, look at me." He looked up, barely. His eyes were glossy, too full for his age. "You did nothing wrong. You understand." He nodded, but she could tell it hadn't sunk in. She reached for her phone and opened the note app. She began typing something quickly, the words forming with clarity and purpose. Across the cabin, a child in row 5 asked loudly, "Why aren't we flying yet?" A man in a blazer responded, "Some lady caused a delay. First-class drama." Imani's stomach tightened, not because of the ignorance, but because Ezra heard it, and now he turned, facing her completely. His voice cracked. "Mom, why don't they want us here?" Amani froze. It wasn't the question. It was the fact that he'd said us, not you. He had included himself. Amani took his hands into hers. "Listen to me." Her voice didn't shake, though everything inside her did. "They don't know who we are. They don't know your heart. They don't know how smart you are or how many nights I spent learning everything just to get us here. They don't know we belong because they've never had to ask whether they belonged." Ezra blinked slowly. "I don't want to fly anymore," he whispered. Amani's heart broke clean in half. She wanted to wrap him up and disappear, take him away from the stares, from the assumptions, from the white noise of judgment, but instead, she did something else. She handed him her phone. "Look," she said, "I want you to read this." Ezra took the phone. The screen read, "To the airline executive. My name is Amani Brooks. My 9-year-old son and I were upgraded to seats 1A and 1B through a corporate partnership for cybersecurity consulting. Since boarding, we have been interrogated, humiliated, and falsely accused of misconduct, all based on the discomfort of your staff, not our actions. I am not writing this to ask for a favor. I am writing because my son is watching, and I refuse to let him learn silence when the world gets loud. I expect accountability. I expect change. And I expect your flight to resume now." Ezra stared at it. "You're going to send?" That Amani nodded. "To the VP, and maybe to the world if I have to." He looked at her again. "Do you think they'll listen?" She smiled, soft but sure. "If they don't, they'll hear us anyway." The door near the cockpit opened. A new face entered the cabin, a woman in her 40s, wearing a navy blazer with a sleek badge that read, "Internal Operations Serena Patel." Her posture was confident, her steps even. Her eyes scanned the cabin carefully. Julian approached her quietly, whispering something in her ear. She nodded and walked straight toward Amani. "Miss Brooks, yes, I'm Serena Patel. I'm with the airline's Ethics and Compliance Division. "May I sit?" Amani nodded toward the aisle seat across from her. Serena sat down and folded her hands neatly. "First, let me apologize for the delay and for the treatment you've experienced. I've reviewed the manifest and the audio recordings from the gate. I'd like to hear your account directly." Amani nodded. She spoke calmly, clearly, with precision. She laid out everything from the moment they scanned their boarding passes to Paula's multiple confrontations and the threat of removal. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't falter. Serena listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable but attentive. Maggie spoke up as well, corroborating every word. After a moment of silence, Serena tapped something into her tablet and then looked up. "Miss Brooks, I can assure you this matter is not being ignored. We will be conducting an internal review of the crew's actions, including possible disciplinary measures. For now, I'd like to inform you that your seats are confirmed and undisputed. You will not be asked to move again." Amani nodded, holding Ezra's hand tighter. "Thank you," she said. Before Serena could stand, Ezra leaned over and whispered to her, "Why did they think we didn't belong?" Serena blinked. She looked at him, then back at Amani. "I think that's the question we all need to answer," she said softly. She stood and moved to the front of the plane, where she called Paula aside. What followed wasn't loud, but it was visible. Serena's expression didn't change. Paula's did. Her face tightened. Her hands folded. Her shoulders dropped just a bit. Moments later, Serena returned to the cabin. "We'll be pushing back from the gate shortly. Please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened." The engines began to hum again, stronger this time. The lights dimmed slightly. The plane was finally moving. Ezra leaned into his mother again. "Are we really flying now?" "Yes, baby, we're really flying. And this time, it's not just the plane." The plane finally began taxiing toward the runway, its slow, deliberate movement a kind of mercy. Inside the cabin, there was a hum of relief. Passengers shifted in their seats, stretched their legs, glanced at their watches. A few even clapped softly as if forward motion erased the tension. But the tension hadn't disappeared. It had only grown quiet. Amani Brooks could feel it, like the weight of a gaze you never invited but always feel. She remained still, one hand on Ezra's back as he leaned against her, thumb resting between his lips the way he hadn't done since he was 6. She didn't remind him not to. Not today. She looked around. The couple in 2C and 2D kept throwing glances toward her. Small. Quick. Like they didn't want to be caught but didn't care if they were. The man had a jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. His wife kept tapping her nails against her armrest. A few rows back, someone was recording on their phone, discreetly, but obviously enough. Another man whispered something to his travel companion while gesturing forward. He didn't point, but the nod was unmistakable. They were still watching her. Not Paula, not Owen, not the woman from compliance, her. Because somehow, in the theater of discomfort, the black woman in seat 1A had become the problem. Not the policies, not the prejudice, but her. Amani's spine remained straight. She had trained herself long ago to sit that way. Shoulders back, chin relaxed, voice calm. It had gotten her through boardrooms where no one expected her to speak, through interviews where they assumed she was the assistant, through tech conferences where they'd hand her a coffee order instead of a microphone. Ezra shifted and looked up at her. His eyes were clearer now, calmer. "Are we almost flying?" She nodded. Soon. Baby, do you think they're still mad? She hesitated. Some of them. Does it matter? It shouldn't. That was her answer, the one she couldn't say aloud, but instead she told him, we did the right thing. That's what matters. Ezra didn't answer, but his hand found hers and held on tighter than before. Across the aisle, Maggie Linwood was writing in her notebook again. The page was nearly full. The words came fast and sharp, like they'd been waiting years for a moment like this. She looked up and caught Imani's eye. Your silence today was louder than their rules, she said. Imani smiled. Yours was pretty loud too. They shared a look. No more needed to be said. In the front galley, Serena Patel reappeared. She approached Imani's row again and knelt beside her. Miss Brooks, I wanted to update you directly. We've initiated a real-time internal log of everything that occurred. That includes all interactions with the crew. Your upgrade has been confirmed and cleared through multiple departments. There will be a formal review of Ms. Greer's actions. Imani nodded. Thank you. Also, Serena added, we've received several passenger complaints about delays. Some have requested compensation. If you're willing, I'd like to have someone from our guest experience team reach out to you after this flight. Not for a scripted apology, for real discussion. Imani's eyebrows lifted. You want to talk to me about how to fix what caused this? I want to listen, Serena said. Imani studied her for a moment. The woman wasn't faking it, not completely. There was fatigue behind her eyes, but also something else. Conviction. Okay, I'll talk, Imani said. Good. Serena stood. And for the record, your son is the calmest passenger we've had today. Ezra looked up shyly. Thank you, ma'am. Serena smiled. You're welcome, young man. She returned to the galley. A flight attendant began the safety demonstration. Imani watched the gestures. She knew them by heart, but she couldn't stop thinking about the phone that was recording earlier. She leaned toward Maggie. Did you see that guy filming Maggie? Nodded. Row 6, blue hoodie. I saw it too. Imani exhaled. I don't want this going viral for the wrong reasons. I don't want Ezra's face used in someone else's narrative. Would you like me to say something? Maggie offered. No. Let's wait. If it surfaces, we'll respond then. Not every battle is fought midair. Maggie nodded. You're right. Timing matters. The plane began to ascend now. The pressure shifted. The roar of the engines filled the cabin. Ezra pressed his face to the window as the runway dropped away beneath them. We're flying, he whispered. We're really flying. Imani rested her head against the seat and let her eyes close just for a moment. When she opened them again, Julian was passing by with a tray of snacks. He leaned close. We should reach cruising altitude soon. Can I offer you something special? We've got a few warm chocolate chip cookies tucked away for guests we actually like. Imani smiled. I'll take 2, please. Julian grinned and handed her the napkin-wrapped cookies. Ezra lit up. Mom, real cookies. Imani handed him one and winked. First-class perks. Julian lingered for just a second longer. Some of us saw all of it. You're not alone. And you weren't wrong. Imani nodded slowly. I know. He moved on. The man in 3C, who had remained silent for most of the flight, finally leaned forward. You handled that with extraordinary control. Imani turned slightly. Thank you. I'm a lawyer, he said. Work in discrimination litigation. If you ever want a referral or a witness statement, I'd be happy to provide it. I'll remember that. Not many people could sit through what you just did without raising their voice. Sometimes a raised eyebrow cuts deeper than a raised voice. He smiled, touche. A few seats back, the whispering returned. But now it was different. Passengers murmured about what they saw, what they felt, what didn't sit right. Even Mr. Remington had gone quiet. His arms were crossed. His wife was now on her phone, scrolling furiously. Imani didn't know if they were texting friends or PR reps. She didn't care. She reached down and pulled Ezra's blanket over him as he drifted into a nap. He deserved peace. He had earned it. And whatever came next, she was ready. Because what they had done, sitting still, speaking up, not yielding, mattered. Maybe not to everyone in the cabin, but to one child and one future. It meant everything. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow as the plane leveled at cruising altitude. Imani Brooks adjusted the blanket across Ezra's chest. He had fallen asleep halfway through the ascent, his head tilted against her arm, one hand still gripping his half-eaten cookie. His soft breathing was the most peaceful sound she had heard all day. Imani leaned her head back and stared at the small light above her seat. It flickered faintly. She let her eyes close for just a moment, but the quiet didn't last. A voice broke it. "Excuse me." It was the woman in 2D, the one who had been whispering with her husband earlier. Her tone was tentative now, her posture slightly hunched forward as she looked over the seat back at Imani. "I just wanted to say, I think you've handled everything really well, with a lot of grace." Imani opened her eyes slowly. "Thank you." The woman hesitated, then added, "I didn't realize it was that serious until the ethics officer showed up." "That's often how it goes," Imani said. "The worst parts look like nothing unless you're the one it happens to." The woman bit her lip and nodded. "I suppose it's easy not to notice when you've never had to." Imani didn't answer. She didn't need to. After a moment, the woman sat back in her seat, pulling her sweater tighter around her shoulders. Maggie leaned across the aisle, whispering, "That was progress. Small, but real." Imani gave a small nod. "Maybe." She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt tired. The kind of tired that goes bone deep. The kind that comes not from one confrontation, but from carrying the memory of 1,000 smaller ones that no one else sees. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Camden. "Media alert. Video from your flight is circulating." Caption says, "Black woman denied seat in first class, despite valid ticket." It's getting attention. News outlets are reaching out. Want to comment, Imani's stomach tightened. She turned the brightness on her phone down and typed quickly, "Not yet. Ezra is sleeping. Let me land with him first. Then we'll talk." She turned the phone face down on the tray. Across the cabin, the man in 3C was still awake. He had been reading legal briefs on his tablet earlier, but now seemed to be simply watching the cabin, observing how people shifted in their seats, how silence lingered like smoke. He leaned over slightly. "If it helps, I can tell you that the video doesn't show any aggression on your part. It's clear you were composed the whole time." "Thank you," Imani said, "but it's not about what's in the video. It's about how people decide to see it." He paused. "You're right. A few rows back, someone coughed loudly. The man in the hoodie who had recorded earlier was scrolling through his phone. When he caught Imani looking, he offered a small shrug, like he wasn't sure if he should apologize or just look away." Imani turned to Maggie. I always wonder what the first person who watches something like that thinks. Not just about me, about what it says about them. Maggie closed her notebook. You know what? I hope some girl sees that video and realizes she isn't crazy, that she isn't alone, because that's what happens first. We internalize, we second guess, and when we finally speak up, the world acts shocked. Imani let that settle. Maybe that's the point. Maybe being visible is the first step, even when it's uncomfortable. The speaker above them chimed, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are cruising at 37,000 feet. Smooth weather ahead. Please remain seated while the seatbelt sign is on." The voice paused. "We'd also like to thank you for your patience during today's departure. As always, your safety and dignity matter to us." Imani raised an eyebrow. "Dignity," she whispered. Maggie smirked. Somebody coached that line. Julian came through the aisle again. This time, he stopped at Imani's row and leaned in slightly. "Just a heads up. There'll be a short, in-flight survey sent to passengers post-landing. Feel free to be honest." Imani gave a small laugh. "I think I'll have some notes." Julian looked at Ezra and lowered his voice. "He's a good kid." Imani nodded. "He's strong, but he shouldn't have to be." Julian pressed his lips together. "No child should." He moved on. Ezra stirred. "Mom," she leaned close. "I'm here, baby." "Are we landing?" "Not yet. We're still in the sky." He rubbed his eyes. "I had a dream that the plane turned around, that we had to go home." Imani smiled gently. "That was just a dream. We're still going forward." Ezra sat up slowly. "Can I draw again?" "Of course." She handed him the sketchbook and pencil. He flipped to a new page and began outlining clouds, an airplane, and two figures inside it. This time, the people had smiles. Imani turned back to her phone. The notifications had increased. News outlets, hashtags, blog posts. She clicked one headline, "House Seat 1A Black Tech Exec Challenges Airline Over Discrimination" beneath it, a still image of her seated calmly beside her son. Another link showed comments. Some were supportive. "She's so composed." "Her son looks terrified." "This is heartbreaking." "She had a valid ticket." "What more do they want?" Others were venomous. "She probably made a scene off camera." Entitled, "Much. Maybe follow instructions next time and you won't get filmed." Imani clicked the screen off. She had seen enough. Ezra looked up from his drawing. "Are people still talking about us?" "Yes," she said. "Why? Because the truth makes people uncomfortable." "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby. We told the truth, and we stayed calm. That's not trouble. That's courage." Ezra smiled faintly. "Then I'm brave too." "The bravest," she whispered. Maggie watched the exchange and wiped a tear from her cheek. Imani saw it and offered her a tissue. "Don't start, or I'll start too." Maggie laughed. Too late. The hum of the engines continued, but inside 1A and 1B there was peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of clarity. They had not chosen the fight, but they had chosen how to stand in it. And for the first time in a long time, Imani didn't feel like she had to shrink to survive. She could take up space, and that space had a name. Ezra. The quiet in the cabin had turned soft, not tense, not anxious, just still, like a deep breath after a long run. Outside, the sky beyond the windows had turned a deep navy. The sun had slipped below the horizon, leaving only a fading red-orange glow that traced the clouds like embers. Ezra finished the last strokes of his new drawing and turned the page toward his mother. It showed a plane flying through a sky full of stars. Inside, 2 people in the window, one big, one small, were smiling, their hands raised in high fives. Imani smiled and kissed his forehead. "I love it," she whispered. Ezra beamed. "I made the stars extra big, because we're flying at night. They're perfect." He looked around, his voice lowering. "Mom, yes, can I ask you something, but not a kid question?" Imani gave a slight laugh. "All your questions are good questions. Go ahead." Ezra leaned closer. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Imani blinked. The question surprised her. "I think I already grew up." Ezra shook his head. "No, I mean, what do you still want to be if you weren't already doing all the serious stuff? Like meetings and helping companies and getting people out of trouble?" Imani sat back, quiet. No one had asked her that in years. She glanced at Maggie, who gave a soft nod as if to say, "Go on. Answer him." Imani took a breath. "You know what I always wanted to be." Ezra shook his head. "A writer," she said. Ezra's eyes widened. "Really, really, like books, essays, poems, anything with words. So why didn't you do that?" Imani hesitated. "Life got busy. I needed to take care of things. I had to make sure you were okay, that we had what we needed. Writing didn't always pay the bills." Ezra tilted his head. "But you still write sometimes." "Right?" She smiled. "I do, just not for everyone to see. You should let them see," he said. Imani paused. The words hit somewhere deep, not because they were sweet, but because they were true. She'd stopped letting herself dream out loud, stopped putting things on paper unless they had a corporate header or a security signature. And here was her son, gently asking her to remember herself. "Maybe I will," she whispered. Ezra reached for the snack tray. "Can I have the last cookie?" She passed it to him. "Yes, but only if you share a bite." "Deal." Across the aisle, Maggie had heard every word. She smiled but didn't interrupt. Instead, she reached into her tote and pulled out a small leather-bound journal. She turned to a blank page and began to write. The heading read, "Flight 417 Things Worth Remembering." Further down, she jotted, "A boy asked his mother a question that should never be forgotten." She smiled to herself and kept writing. Imani's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Camden. "Multiple reporters have reached out. Your name's out now. We can still hold them off, or we can shape the story ourselves. Your call." Imani stared at the message for a long moment. Ezra was nibbling at his cookie, humming a song from his favorite movie. She typed a reply. "Let's shape it, but carefully. I want this to be more than a headline. I want it to mean something." Camden answered instantly. "Say the word. I'll loop in someone I trust for messaging, but you'll set the tone." She put the phone away. She would deal with it when they landed. Julian came by once more with bottled water and a smile. "How are you two doing?" Ezra held up his drawing. Wanna-See Julian knelt down beside him and examined the page. "That is the best flight drawing I've ever seen. Those stars, 10 out of 10. Ezra grinned. "Thanks. I made us flying through night because this flight feels longer than usual." Julian laughed. "Sometimes the important ones do." He turned to Imani. "We're about 90 minutes out from Atlanta. If you need anything, just call. And, for what it's worth, I'd fly with you two any day." Imani placed a hand over her heart. "Thank you, Julian." As he walked away, Maggie leaned over again. You've got something powerful here. A platform. A moment. What are you going to do with it? Imani thought about that. I'm still deciding. I don't want it to be performative. I want it to matter. Then don't rush. When the right words come, write them down. Maggie smiled. And if you're serious about writing, I know a publisher who still owes me favors. Imani laughed. You just carry publisher contacts in your tote. Maggie shrugged. You never know when history's being written in the next row over. Ezra tugged on Imani's sleeve. Mom, yes, I think when I grow up, I want to be someone who fixes things, like a mechanic. No, like feelings. When people get hurt like today, I want to help them feel less alone. Imani felt something tighten in her throat. That's a beautiful thing to want. Baby, you think I can? I think you already do. Ezra leaned into her again, and she kissed the top of his head. The cabin lights dimmed even more as passengers prepared for the final stretch of the flight. The crew moved quietly, checking belts, trash, and trays. Imani reached into her bag and pulled out her own notebook, one she hadn't used in years. She opened to a fresh page. Date September 9th Flight 417 title. The day my son asked me to remember who I was. She smiled to herself and wrote the first line. We weren't supposed to be seen, but somehow we were, and that changed everything. The plane had begun its gradual descent. The soft hum of the engine shifted ever so slightly. The seatbelt light blinked back on with its familiar chime. Passengers stirred. Phones were powered back on. The final hour of quiet had ended, replaced by the rustling of bags, hushed conversations, and the preparation for landing. Ezra had drifted off again, head nestled into his blanket. His sketchbook lay closed on his lap. Imani sat still, watching the curve of the clouds through the window. Atlanta was just beyond the horizon now, and with it, whatever was waiting on the ground. She wasn't sure if she was ready. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She expected Camden, another update, another article. But the screen flashed a name she hadn't seen in over a year. Valerie Trent, Executive Director, Women in Cyber Alliance. Imani's heart skipped. She hesitated, then answered quietly, Hello, Imani. Valerie's voice was brisk but warm. I just got off a red-eye and my inbox is flooded with your name. Imani rubbed her forehead. Yeah, it's been a day. Are you all right? We're okay. Ezra's with me. We're still in the air, but almost down. I read the reports, watched the clip. It's everywhere. You didn't just stay calm, you stayed present. That matters. Imani didn't speak for a moment. Valerie continued. We're in a unique position. Imani, if you're open to it, we can shape this narrative with intention. Not just as a viral moment, but as the start of something structural. We've already had inquiries from civil rights groups, tech equity coalitions, the national press. You've become a lightning rod. Imani exhaled slowly. I didn't ask for that. I know. That's why it matters. You didn't seek a spotlight. You defended your son with grace and clarity. That's power, even if it's quiet. Imani glanced at Ezra, still asleep. What would that look like? Valerie paused. We could frame a letter, an open statement, from you, as a professional, as a mother, and as a woman who understands the systems that allow discrimination to hide in plain sight. We'd share it strategically, not for clicks, but for impact. We could push for policy review. We could name this moment, give it weight. Imani looked at the small tray table in front of her. She imagined her notebook, the sentence she had written earlier. We weren't supposed to be seen, but somehow we were. And that changed everything. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's talk after I land." Valerie's tone softened. "Take your time, hug your son, but know we're here, and we've got your back." Amani hung up and stared at the blank phone screen. What would it mean to be more than a passenger? To become the voice of a problem so many tried to minimize? Maggie, as if sensing the change, leaned in. "Good news. A call from someone I used to work with. She thinks we could make this bigger, structural. Turn it into a platform. You sound unsure." "I am. I don't want to become a symbol if it means becoming a target." Maggie nodded thoughtfully. "That's fair. But sometimes the choice isn't whether you're seen. It's what you choose to do now that they're looking." Julian passed by again, giving them the final checks before landing. The air outside grew heavier as the plane dipped beneath the clouds. The windows fogged slightly, city lights now flickering in the distance like spilled gold. Ezra stirred. "Are we there almost? Baby, my ears feel weird. Swallow, like we practiced." He did, then looked up at her. "You were talking on the phone." "Yes. Was it important?" "Maybe. We'll find out soon." Ezra nodded and looked out the window again. "I can't wait to see the ground." Amani smiled. "Me too." But the second they touched down, her phone buzzed again. A new message. "Camden. They're waiting at the gate. Multiple media outlets, some protesters, some allies, and the airline's PR team." Amani blinked. "Wait. What?" She showed the message to Maggie, who read it and raised both brows. "Looks like you've arrived, sweetheart, in more ways than one." Amani closed her eyes. "I just wanted to fly with my son. And now I'm landing with a movement in my lap." The wheels touched the runway with a gentle bump. The engines roared, then gradually slowed as the aircraft coasted along the tarmac. Ezra squeezed her hand. That was a smooth landing. Yes, it was, but it was only the first. Over the intercom, Owen's voice echoed. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Atlanta. Please remain seated as we taxi to the gate. On behalf of our crew, we thank you for flying with us." Amani turned to Maggie. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Do you think I can do this?" Maggie smiled. "You already did. The rest is just walking through the door you opened." Ezra looked between them. "Are we famous now?" Amani laughed softly. "Maybe a little, but we'll still have to unpack and do laundry." He groaned. "That doesn't seem fair." She kissed his forehead. "It never is." The plane came to a full stop at the gate. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Passengers leapt up as usual, grabbing bags, bumping elbows, trying to get ahead by inches, but Amani remained seated. Julian arrived beside her. "There's a team waiting outside the jet bridge. I'll walk you out if you'd like." "Thank you." "Julian." He bent down slightly. "And whatever happens, know that today you did more than just board a flight. You showed people what dignity looks like in real time." Amani rose and gathered her things. Ezra clutched his backpack and held tight to her side. Maggie stood too. "I'll walk with you, if you don't mind. Old lady privilege. I'll lean on your arm and pretend it's for balance." Amani smiled. "I'd be honored." They stepped off the plane together, the three of them. One woman who spoke truth, one woman who held history, and one boy who had seen more than most adults would dare to confront. As they moved through the jet bridge, the air grew warmer, louder, flashes, voices, signs, phones held high. Ezra stopped, looking overwhelmed. Imani knelt down beside him. "This is just noise, baby. You and me, we're still us. Keep your eyes on me." He nodded. "Okay." She stood tall and stepped into the light. The moment Imani stepped off the jet bridge, the lights hit her like a second sunrise. Flashes burst from cameras on both sides of the corridor. Voices clashed mid-air. Reporters shouting questions as microphones were extended past a barricade of airline staff trying and failing to maintain order. "Miss Brooks, is it true you were removed from your seat because of your race? Did you threaten the crew? What would you say to the airline right now? Are you pursuing legal action?" Ezra flinched beside her. Imani immediately bent low and placed her hands on his shoulders. "Just look at me. Okay, eyes right here. You're doing great." He nodded, though his eyes were wide. Julian stepped forward and gently waved the crowd back. "Step aside. Let them through." But the line between press and public had blurred. Some people were holding signs. One read, "Justice for Seat 1A." Another read, "We see you, Imani." A small group clapped as she passed, not cheering wildly, just showing support. It was quiet but intentional, a presence that mattered. Maggie walked beside her, gripping her cane tightly. "Don't let them take your focus," she whispered. "Speak when you're ready, not a moment sooner." A woman stepped into her path, thrusting out a phone. "Imani, I'm live streaming. Please, just tell us. How did it feel to be targeted like that?" Imani didn't break stride. She kept her gaze forward, arms wrapped protectively around Ezra. Julian led them to a side hallway. There, 2 security guards were waiting beside a woman in a gray blazer holding a digital tablet. "Ms. Brooks, I'm Nadine from Guest Services. We've arranged a private lounge for you if you'd like to debrief and take a moment to breathe. The airline's executive VP is on site and available to speak if you choose." Imani nodded, but looked at Maggie first. "Will you join us?" "Of course." Nadine guided them through a service door and down a quieter corridor. They passed no windows, no flashes, no shouting, just dull beige walls and the sound of distant airport announcements echoing through vents. Inside the lounge, everything was white and silver, the kind of expensive minimalism that looked clean but not lived in. Ezra dropped into a cushy armchair and finally exhaled. "I didn't know so many people had cameras." "Me neither," Imani said softly. "But that's how the world watches now. Fast and loud." Camden was already there, sitting at a round table near the center. His laptop was open and his brow furrowed. He stood the second he saw her. "You okay? Still breathing?" He looked at Ezra. "Hey, little man, I heard you held it down up there." Ezra grinned shyly. "I didn't even cry. That's tougher than most adults." Camden turned to Imani again. "There's a wave coming, but we can surf it on your terms." She sat down. "What's out there?" "The footage from the plane is everywhere, not just social media. Cable news picked it up. Headlines are split. Some are calling it courageous. Some say it's exaggerated. A few are already using the word activist like it's an insult." And the airline. "They released a statement about 20 minutes ago. It's vague. Apologizes for any passenger experience that may have caused distress, and says they're conducting a thorough internal review. Standard PR speak. Nothing personal. Nothing that names what happened." Imani exhaled. "So basically, nothing at all." He nodded. "But the public reaction is real, and there's a real hunger for leadership here. especially from you." She looked at her son again, then back to Camden. "I didn't plan this, but maybe that's why it matters," Maggie said. "You didn't seek power. You just refused to be erased. That's what people need to see." Valerie's voice crackled through on a call Camden had already queued up. "Amani, I just got off a call with the National Equity Coalition. They want to offer you a platform to speak next week. National syndication, prime time, 30 minutes, unedited." Amani blinked. "What would I even say?" "Whatever you want. You could read a letter, share your experience, talk about Ezra, or just tell the truth. But the microphone will be yours. No filters." Camden leaned closer. "You don't owe anyone a speech, but you do have something the world needs, a mirror and a voice." Imani sat still. The room went quiet for a moment. She could feel every breath, every heartbeat, every inch of weight pressing into her shoulders, not just from today, but from years of moments like this that no one saw. She picked up her phone, scrolled through the hundreds of messages, texts, emails, missed calls, then slowly, purposefully. She opened the camera app. She turned it to face herself. No makeup, no lights, just her and Ezra. She looked at the camera for a long second, then pressed record. "Hello, my name is Imani Brooks. I didn't ask to be part of a national conversation. I didn't want to become a headline. But this morning, I boarded a flight with my son, and before we even left the ground, someone decided I didn't belong in the seat I paid for. Someone looked at me and looked through me." She paused. "But I didn't yell. I didn't escalate. I stayed seated. I stayed present, because I had a little boy beside me who needed to see what dignity looks like in the face of dismissal." She turned the camera slightly, letting Ezra wave softly. "This is my son, Ezra. He's 9. He loves drawing stars and airplanes, and today he watched his mother be questioned, challenged, and doubted because of the skin we share." Another pause. "We're not angry. We're not seeking vengeance, but we are demanding truth. We are asking the airline and everyone watching to answer one question: if not us in seat 1A, then who she ended the video." Camden stared at her. That was powerful. Maggie had tears in her eyes. "You just wrote your first essay in years, with your face and your voice." Imani smiled softly, felt like it was time. Ezra tugged her sleeve. "Mom, yeah, that was brave. You make me brave, baby." The lounge door opened. A woman in a navy suit entered, flanked by a quiet assistant, Imani Brooks. "Yes, my name is Renee Caldwell. I'm the Executive VP of Customer Integrity for Ascendant Air. I'd like to speak with you privately, if you're willing." Imani stood. "I think I'd prefer witnesses." She gestured to Camden, Maggie, and Ezra. Renee nodded. "Of course." As they took their seats around a small circular table, Imani could feel the shift. No longer a passenger, no longer a target. She was becoming the person they had tried to ignore. And now they had no choice but to listen. Imani sat at the polished conference table, the air thick with a mixture of cool professionalism and barely concealed tension. Across from her, Renee Caldwell, the airline's executive vice president of customer integrity, adjusted her blazer, eyes sharp but cautious. Beside Renee sat 2 other executives, their expressions unreadable, clearly briefed to handle the situation with utmost care. Imani glanced down at Ezra, who was quietly sketching on a notepad beside her. The boy's calm presence gave her strength. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say in her mind 100 times. But now that she was here, facing the people responsible for the ordeal. Her voice felt steady, tempered by years of resilience and quiet dignity. Renee broke the silence first. "Ms. Brooks, first, allow me to sincerely apologize for the events that unfolded during your recent flight with Ascendant Air. The behavior you encountered does not reflect our company's values, and we deeply regret the distress it caused you and your son." Amani nodded, appreciating the formal tone, but wary of corporate language. "Thank you for acknowledging that. What I want most, though, is accountability, not just words." Renee's gaze sharpened. "Absolutely. And that is why we convened this meeting today. We want to hear from you directly, to understand the impact and to outline steps we intend to take going forward." Amani took a deep breath. "This isn't just about me or Ezra. It's about the countless others who have been, and still are, made to feel invisible or unwelcome in spaces they've rightfully earned, whether on a plane, at work, or in daily life." The room shifted subtly, the weight of her words settling in. When the flight attendant questioned my identity repeatedly, and when the supervisor threatened removal despite valid tickets, it wasn't a simple error. It was systemic bias, wrapped in protocol and prejudice. One of the executives, a man with a neat gray beard, interjected carefully. "We acknowledge that the procedures in place may not adequately protect passengers from such experiences. That is why we are committed to reviewing and revising our policies." Amani's eyes locked with his. Policies matter only if they are enforced and understood by every employee on the front lines. Diversity training can't be a checkbox exercise. It must be ongoing, meaningful, and held accountable. Renee nodded thoughtfully. "We agree, and we are already planning an overhaul of our diversity and inclusion programs, mandatory training for all customer-facing staff, enhanced complaint mechanisms, and a new passenger advocacy office." Amani leaned forward slightly. "The advocacy office is a good start, but who will staff it? How will you ensure complaints are taken seriously and lead to real consequences?" Renee smiled. "We are currently identifying leaders for the office, individuals with both industry experience and a deep commitment to equity, and we intend to empower them with the authority to act swiftly and transparently." Amani's shoulders relaxed a bit. This was progress, but there was more to say. "I want to talk about how your company can partner with those who understand these issues deeply, not just from a policy perspective, but lived experience. I have spent years working in technology, creating solutions to identify and mitigate bias in algorithms and processes. This is where the future lies." The executives exchanged looks. "We are very interested in hearing more about your work. We see the value of integrating technology and human insight to build a truly equitable customer experience." Amani smiled. This was the moment to bridge worlds. "That's why I founded Equitech Solutions, a startup dedicated to developing AI-driven tools that flag biased interactions in real time, helping customer service agents course-correct before harm is done." She paused. Ascendant Air's recent incident could have been prevented with the right tools and training combined. I want to offer my expertise as a consultant to help implement these solutions here. The room grew quiet as the executives absorbed this. Renee was the first to respond. "Ms. Brooks, your proposal is compelling. We would be honored to collaborate with Equitech Solutions. Your perspective is invaluable, not just as a technologist, but as someone who has experienced discrimination firsthand." Amani nodded, feeling a sense of purpose ignite inside her. Thank you. This isn't about finger-pointing. It's about creating a safer, more respectful space for every passenger, including my son. Ezra looked up, meeting her eyes. You're doing something important. Mom. She squeezed his hand gently. Together, we are. Renee cleared her throat. In addition to these initiatives, Ascendant Air will be taking direct action against the employees involved in the incident. They will be removed from customer service duties pending further investigation. Amani appreciated the decisive words. This sends a clear message. It must, because silence and inaction only perpetuate harm. Renee nodded solemnly. We want to build trust, and that starts with transparency. We will provide regular updates on the steps we take and welcome your ongoing feedback. Amani looked around the room. There is one more thing. She reached into her bag and pulled out the small note Ruth had given her, the retired civil rights attorney who had stood quietly by her side during the flight. This note contains her contact information. Ruth has agreed to assist with legal oversight and community engagement as part of this effort. Renee accepted the note respectfully. It's a privilege to have such expertise involved. Amani allowed herself a moment of gratitude for the allies who had appeared when she needed them most. She glanced at Maggie, who gave her a reassuring smile from the corner of the room. The meeting wrapped up with promises, handshakes, and a shared understanding that this was just the beginning, not the end. As they left the room, Amani felt the heaviness of the past days begin to lift. The journey had been painful and exhausting, but now it carried a thread of hope. Outside, the Atlanta sun was beginning to dip low, painting the sky with hues of amber and rose. Amani breathed deeply, pulling Ezra close. This fight is far from over, but today we made our stand, together, and sometimes that is enough to change the course of a flight and a life. 6 months had passed since the day Amani Brooks and her son Ezra boarded that flight, only to face unwarranted suspicion and humiliation. The memory still stirred a mix of pain and pride inside her. But now, it was coupled with something far more powerful change. Today, standing at the podium of the National Technology and Inclusion Summit in Chicago, Amani felt the weight of thousands of eyes watching. But her voice remained calm, strong, and unwavering. She glanced at Ezra sitting in the front row, now 10 years old, his eyes shining with pride and curiosity. Beside him sat Maggie, the loyal passenger who had been an unexpected source of support, and Ruth Coleman, the retired civil rights attorney who had become a mentor and grandmother figure to them both. Taking a deep breath, Amani began. When I boarded that plane 6 months ago, I was just a software developer who happened to be black. When I stepped off, I realized I needed to be more a black software developer who could use her skills to confront bias wherever it lurks. She clicked the remote in her hand, and the screen behind her illuminated with the logo of Equitech Solutions. Our world is increasingly shaped by algorithms and automated decisions. These technologies can either perpetuate inequality or be tools for justice. At Equitech, we are committed to the latter. The audience leaned in as she shared stories of how biased facial recognition software misidentifies people of color, how loan approvals and hiring systems often reflect the prejudices of their creators, and how such systemic flaws have real human consequences. But the story is not just about technology, she said softly. It's about people, the ones who experience discrimination and the allies who stand beside them. She spoke of her journey, the humiliation on the plane, the courage it took to stand her ground, and the community that rallied around her. The moment was intimate and powerful, inviting empathy and reflection. Behind the scenes, her phone buzzed with messages of support from leaders in tech and civil rights organizations. Alexander Chin, the CEO of DataSphere, texted her congratulations on the keynote and news that several new companies were interested in piloting Equitech's bias detection tools. After her speech, backstage buzzed with excitement. Reporters approached gently, asking questions not just about the incident but about the broader movement she was helping lead. Imani was tired, but she smiled, knowing every word she spoke might ripple out to change countless lives. Back at home in Atlanta, the Brooks household was filled with new energy. Ezra's art filled the walls drawings of planes, stars, and bridges, symbols of connection and hope. Ruth had recently moved closer to help nurture Ezra's blossoming interest in civil rights law, sharing stories of courage and justice from decades past. Imani's phone chimed with a message from Renee Caldwell, the airline executive who had invited her to consult on developing their new passenger advocacy office. The initiative was already showing promising results, and Ascendant Air was committed to ongoing transparency and accountability. Yet, despite the progress, Imani knew the journey was far from over. One evening, as she tucked Ezra into bed, he asked quietly, "Mom, do you think people will really change, or are they just being nice because you're famous now?" She kissed his forehead gently. "Some things are changing because of the work we are doing, but having a platform does make a difference. That's why we have to keep pushing to build systems that treat everyone fairly, whether they are known or unknown, connected or not." Ezra's eyes grew heavy, but his resolve was clear. "I want to help make sure no one feels the way I did that day on the plane." And in that moment, Imani knew the fight for justice was not just hers, but his too. Together, they dreamed of a future where dignity was a right, not a privilege, where every seat, every place, and every moment belonged to everyone who earned it. As the city lights of Atlanta flickered beyond her window, Imani felt a quiet hope settle deep in her heart. The road ahead would be long and winding, but it was theirs to walk, hand in hand. Imani Brooks' story is more than a personal triumph. It is a mirror held up to society, reflecting the painful reality of discrimination that many endure every day. Her courage reminds us that standing up against injustice is never easy, especially when the world expects silence. But it also shows that with resilience, support, and sometimes just one decisive call, change is possible. As we close this chapter, let's honor the strength of every person who has faced unfair treatment and refused to be erased. Let us challenge systems that allow prejudice to hide behind policy. And let us remember that dignity belongs to all, no matter where we come from or what others assume about us. The fight is ongoing, and stories like Imani's inspire hope and action for a better, fairer tomorrow. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful journeys that reveal the strength of the human spirit and the urgent need for justice. Stay tuned. There are many more voices that deserve to be heard. Together, we can help change the narrative.